let me welcome you to the very spot where Benita and I first laid eyes upon each other.
After all these years, you're still so sweet, Edward.
God has granted us this one day to come back to visit all of our family and friends to tell you our story. And as I look down at our gravestone, I'm reminded of the day that Benita and I first laid eyes on each other. You see, this new section of the cemetery used to be the old baseball field. Benita and I had hoped to select the pitcher's mound for our location for our gravestone, but we had to settle for first base right here on the old baseball field.
I remember that day well. It was my birthday, and St. Boniface was playing a baseball game with Mount Angel. The pitcher was having a very bad game, and I could tell that he was really frustrated with his performance. Little did I know that then that I would marry that pitcher someday. The pitcher was Ed. And I felt so bad for him, and I wish that I could do something to encourage him, but that would mean rooting for the opposing team.
Just like life, it changes. Many things change over the years. The old baseball field was replaced with this new part of the cemetery. And that's progress, I guess.
So, this is our opportunity to tell you what our life was like and how it was that we arrived in this little farming town of Sublimity. Ed, why don't you start with your family?
Sure. Well, my grandparents came from Germany, as were many people in this area. Gebhardt, my father, followed his two brothers, to Mount Angel around the year 1900. My father and mother, Veronica, had 11 children here in Mount Angel, and my father was the postmaster there. The Abbey was where I attended high school, and after graduating high school, I went to work at the Mount Angel Creamery. I picked up all the milk in this local area, visited all the local farms. I remember I first traveled with a team of horses, picking up milk. Later, I drove a truck, and I got to go as far away as Scio and Jordan. One of my regular stops was at Al Hassler's farm in Sublimity. And that's where Benita's stepmom, Teresa, would send Benita out just to order some butter. Teresa was hoping it would be love at first sight. And you know what? It worked. Another important consideration for our families was that we both shared the same Catholic faith.
My great-grandparents were both from Prussia. Their surnames were definitely ones that you have heard around here before, the Ditters and the Steff. My grandfather Joseph married my grandmother Elizabeth on the Hassler homestead in Minnesota. They had good friends that persuaded them to make the journey to Oregon. They were the Zimmermans, the Spinners, and the Silbernagels. Grandfather Joseph bought 70 acres right here in Sublimity and built his own home because he was also a skilled carpenter. After the Civil War, it was a turbulent time in the country and also in our family. My brother Charles got typhoid and he became very sick. My grandfather Joseph died of a heart attack while working on the farm, and just 2 days later, Charles died as well. And so they had a double funeral for them right here at St. Boniface. It was such a sad time. Tuberculosis also affected our family. I was just 13 years old when my mother Anna died. My father tried to cheer her up by redecorating the house, but nothing could bring back the joy in her life. She spent a year at a sanitarium in Turner, but she hated it and she begged to come home. And so my father added a porch onto the house because fresh air and rest were the only things that made her feel better. We were able to visit with her from a distance, and at least we could see her every day. Her illness lasted for 8 years, and she died at the age of 39. St. Boniface had a custom of ringing the bells when someone died. And I remember sitting at school and hearing the bells chime, and I would count the number of rings just to make sure that it was a different number than my mother's age. Grandma's death told us that we had to burn some of our belongings because at that time, that was considered a way to prevent the spread of the disease. My mother's long illness was really difficult for my father. He and I were very close. We'd spend a lot of time together outdoors and in the barn. He was everything to me. About a year after my mother's death, my father met a lady by the name of Teresa Miller. She came to the area from Canada to be the head cook for a wealthy banking family in Salem, the Bushes. Our Aunt Minnie Hassler had moved in with us to help take care of our mother. And then we got the news. Our father was going to marry Teresa, and that meant that Aunt Minnie had to move out. That would change our lives forever because we loved her so much. Aunt Minnie decided to spend her time working on a big project with Father Sherbring. They called it the Marian Home for the Elderly and Aged because she really had a heart for the older folks in the community. She was very important in the life of this little town, and she accomplished a great number of charitable acts for the community.
Well, and as you can imagine, we got married. She married the milkman right here at St. Boniface. It was a lovely autumn wedding. I asked my brother Clarence to be my best man, and Benicia asked her best friend Franny to be her maid of honor. We even had the children's choir from the school sing at our ceremony. My father-in-law had graciously provided and put on a dinner after our wedding, and then we went on a brief honeymoon after that. Then I had to get back to work at the creamery. Our first house that we rented was $10 a month. And we bought our first house for $900. The next year we sold that house. We sold it for $1,800. And that extra money really helped us out. I got to buy my first Farmall tractor. I continued to work at the creamery, and we both picked hops and berries to make ends meet. Then World War II broke out, 1939. Several of my brothers were drafted, but I was exempt. I was taking care of a farm. I did volunteer to do work in the town. I made sure that the cars had yellow cellophane over their headlights while driving at night. And this is to make sure that if the Japanese were flying over, they wouldn't be able to see their headlights as well. I also helped camouflage some of the local bridges because we didn't want them getting bombed. I just wanted to do what I could. But I always dreamed of owning my own dairy farm. I thought that would never happen. It's too expensive, I couldn't do it. But Benicia's father told me about a farm that was for sale in Sublimity, 5 miles north of Sublimity. And it was for sale. President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal plan enabled me to purchase 120 acres for $12,000 with no money down on a low interest loan. What a blessing for our family. I eventually bought the 40 acres next door. That gave us a total of 160 acres. So when you drive to Silverton, you can see our beautiful little farm with a small pond and the big white house up on the hill. The house was built in 1900.
Let's keep going.
The house was built in 1900 and had no electricity or plumbing. Before power and water was in the house, we brought water up the hill to the house from a spring down by the pond and had this little one-piston gas engine that would push it up the hill. Did that ever make a loud racket until we finally got indoor plumbing? We also had an oil stove for heat, and eventually part of the woodshed became our indoor bathroom. The older boys helped me with the cows, you know, all that fun stuff, shoveling the manure, cleaning them up, and all that good stuff. but I know it taught my boys how to work hard. The original owner of the farm had hired Chinese workers to dig out this small stream that was like a ditch to a 10-foot wide stream. And boy, did our boys have a ball with that. They loved skipping rocks and looking for crawdads, fishing, all those things that boys love to do.
We had 4 sons and a daughter: Ollie, John, Jerry, Doug, and finally, Becky. A good education was very important to us, so all of our kids attended St. Boniface schools. By the time Doug and Becky reached high school, however, the schools had closed, and so they attended St. Regis in Staten. With all the kids in school, I decided to get a job at the Staten cannery. I thought I'd give it a try, maybe work for a year, and I ended up staying there for 27 years. I started out working on the line, and then when a position opened up in the first aid room, I switched jobs.
Well, eventually the farm just became too much for us, too big to handle. The kids moved out, we decided to sell the farm. Then we decided to get into the grass seed business. But later on, then the grass seed business didn't do so well either, and so then I went to work for the Stuttgart Lumber Company in Idana, which I stayed there until my retirement, working there for 20 years.
As we got older, Ed began to slow down due to the lasting effects of all those years that he smoked. He had quit smoking 6 years previously, and we were planning on spending the Thanksgiving holiday with family. Ed asked me to drive to the coast. Ed never asked me to drive, and so I knew something was wrong. I drove him straight to the doctor's office in Staten, and sadly, he had a massive heart attack right there in the waiting room and died at the age of 71. When Becky and I went to pick out a gravestone for Ed's grave and later mine, we were looking at a brochure with a photograph of a headstone, and on that headstone were the names Edward and Benicia. What an eerie coincidence. I knew that I couldn't live on the farm all by myself, but I wasn't sure what to do. My son Jerry called and suggested that I move to California where he was living, and Becky and her family made the decision to move there at that time as well. I really didn't want to leave everything that was familiar, my family and friends and church, but they convinced me that it would be a good move for me and that it would start a new chapter in my life. I learned to love the California sunshine and traveling, and of course, spending time with the grandchildren. As time went on, I too began to slow down. I told my son one day that I would die the following Thursday at 4 p.m. The family reassured me that I was mistaken. However, as that day approached, I became weaker and weaker. I did die on that day in November 2008 at 4 p.m. As I'm looking back over my life, I would like to leave you with the words of a poem entitled The Last Chapter. I asked for health that I might do greater things. I was given infirmity that I might do better things. I asked for riches that I might be happy. I was given poverty that I might be wise. I asked for power that I might have the praise of men. I was given weakness that I might feel the need for God. I asked for all things that I might enjoy life. I was given life that I might enjoy all things. I got nothing I asked for, but everything I hoped for. Almost despite myself, my unspoken prayers were answered. I am among all men and women most richly blessed. Thank you for joining us today, our anniversary, and allowing us to share our story with you.